Even though we face the very real possibility that MAGA cultist Jim Jordan becomes the next Republican Speaker of the House and second in line of presidential succession, I want to remind everybody that Democrats did the right thing by voting to remove Kevin McCarthy. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, I said that I would discuss this, then I got distracted with other stories, and then I was out of town, but we absolutely needed to cover this because there's a very real possibility that Jim Jordan, the MAGA cultist endorsed by Donald Trump, may become the next Speaker of the House. Tomorrow, Tuesday, there is a scheduled floor vote in which Republicans will attempt to make that a reality. He needs 217 votes. As of this recording, he doesn't have them, but he is a heck of a lot closer than everybody expected, and he is rapidly approaching 217. So that possibility is becoming a probability. Who knows? But we have to brace ourselves, okay? With that in mind, the question becomes, and actually has been for some time for some people, did Democrats screw up? Did we fail to seize an opportunity? Did we fail some sort of moral or political obligation to protect Kevin McCarthy to avoid this contingency? I don't think so, but others disagree. I want to play this clip. I want to show you some things from an article, and then I want to show you some tweets from a handsome fella that you may or may not know, and then we're going to unpack this all together.
There is a crisis on the international stage. Not just, how can they not coalesce around someone in a moment like this? How do you explain it?
I don't have an explanation. I think it's another embarrassment for the Republican Party. Mike McFaul, who's a very serious lawmaker from Texas, from the Homeland Security Committee, said the world is burning. The world is on fire. And we can't seem to come to an agreement on a leader. It's a real problem. I mean, at the end of the week here, with all of this chaos among Republicans, but the much graver circumstances around the world, I actually have my eye on Democrats. How long are Democrats going to stand by in the world of identity politics and zero-sum politics and not be part of any solution? We'll see. I think there's more cards to be played before Democrats jump in. But I think people who don't follow this day in
and he goes on for another couple of minutes. That was David Gregory, a CNN correspondent. Then you have this op-ed written in the Daily Beast, and this was almost 2 weeks ago, by Matt Lewis, a conservative commentator for the otherwise progressive Daily Beast, where he says, Democrats blew a huge political win by not saving Kevin McCarthy as House Speaker, and then the subheading says, they could have been leaders who rose above culture war partisan rancor and put country first. Instead, they voted for chaos and craziness. And then that handsome fellow that I told you about on Twitter, oh my gosh, he looks so much like me. He says, this was in response to me sparring with some centrist political commentators, Sitch and Adam, who I often enjoy sparring with, and he was also making the case. So this is a very common talking point, right? You have political commentators, political analysts, political streamers, all making the case that Democrats failed somehow. They either morally and politically failed, or they failed to seize an opportunity. And as the threat of a Jim Jordan speakership becomes increasingly likely, I want to make the case that even now, based on everything we know, Democrats didn't fail to seize an opportunity, and they didn't fail to meet some sort of moral and political obligation. They did the right thing based on the evidence that we have. So Kevin McCarthy was a brinkman, a bad faith actor, and a liar. And these things, particularly in tandem, disqualified him from being a reliable partner that Democrats could work with. The only way that Democrats would have failed some sort of, again, moral and political obligation or some sort of, realpolitik opportunity is in a different timeline with a different Kevin McCarthy and a different set of facts. Like, if Kevin McCarthy were an honest broker, a good faith actor, and someone they could trust, who just had legitimate political disagreements with Democrats, then I would agree to prevent a hypothetical Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene or Jim Jordan speakership, that they should have voted to save him, right? If he actually were the moderate he often pretends to be. But that's not who Kevin McCarthy was. So, therefore, there was no moral or political obligation to save him because Kevin McCarthy's faults disqualified him. These weren't minor issues. These were major issues, which made him a bad speaker for Democrats. Bad in the ways that Jim Jordan is bad. Like, the other ways that Jim Jordan may be worse than Kevin McCarthy are like, it's like icing on top of a cake. The substance was already there and shared by Kevin McCarthy. Jim Jordan is also a liar, a brinkman, and a bad faith actor. So it's like, I don't know, it's like your car is already totaled under Kevin McCarthy, versus Jim Jordan comes along and totals your car and then, I don't know, disintegrates it, right? Either way, the car is not drivable, okay, to use a metaphor. I'll just remind everybody of the facts, okay? When Kevin McCarthy became Speaker, he engaged in brinkmanship over a pretty big freaking deal, which was the debt ceiling negotiation. So the debt ceiling concerns the amount of money the Treasury can borrow to pay America's bills. Okay, it has nothing to do with future spending, but Republicans always like to make it about future spending when it's a Democrat in the White House. So under Donald Trump, the debt ceiling was raised 3 times by Kevin McCarthy and others without budget cuts for future budgets. They don't care about that. It's a blank check. Yes, sir, Mr. President, whatever you want, Mr. President. But when it's a Democrat in the White House, well, then they can use it as leverage to blackmail that president into making budget cuts. They tried to do it under Bill Clinton. They tried to do it under Barack Obama. They tried to do it under Joe Biden. So Kevin McCarthy says, hey, listen, at the risk of a U.S. default, which would trigger a domestic and a global economic catastrophe, I'm not going to let you pay America's bills, Mr. President, unless you agree to certain spending cuts. Now, unfortunately, President Biden made a deal with Kevin McCarthy. But Biden held up his end. We'll get to that in just a second. McCarthy reneged on his. So right now we established a Brinkman in the worst possible way. Strike 1. Strike 2. Kevin McCarthy reneged on his word that he would not launch an impeachment inquiry into President Biden without a full vote on the House of Representatives, right? The idea being that it should have majority support from the House before you try to even launch an impeachment inquiry into a sitting president. That was Kevin McCarthy's standard under Donald Trump, and he even repeated it under President Biden. He, as a matter of fact, repeated that vow 12 days before he broke it. He said on Breitbart News, nope, I'm not going to have an impeachment inquiry into President Biden without a full vote. 12 days later, he just changes his mind and announces an impeachment inquiry into the president without the vote, presumably because he couldn't get the vote. That was strike 2, major lie. Which brings us to strike 3, the government shutdown. So President Biden proposed a budget which was commensurate with the parameters established by he and Kevin McCarthy. He held up his end because, of course, Biden being a Democrat is morally superior to the Republican Kevin McCarthy. That's what you can expect. Kevin McCarthy reneged on his deal. And he proposed or allowed the proposal of these ridiculous budgets of like 20% spending cuts in major sectors of government. It was wildly incongruent with what he and Biden agreed to. Thus started the near government shutdown. And at the 11th hour, McCarthy blinked. And he said, okay, I'll agree to a continuing resolution for 45 days at current spending levels. So that's what happened. Now, you might be tempted to say, well, it sounds like, yeah, he dragged his feet. No, that really wasn't good. But at least he honored, when push came to shove, at least he honored his word. Well, no, he didn't, because he and Biden didn't agree to a continuing resolution. They agreed to a budget. So even then, Kevin McCarthy lied. Strike 3. But wait, there's more, so said the late, great Billy Mays. And there was more, because the very next day, Kevin McCarthy went on Face the Nation and told Margaret Brennan and the American people, actually, no, it wasn't Republicans who nearly caused the government shutdown. It was those Democrats. And so Kevin McCarthy had to be fact-checked in real time, very awkwardly, by this enlightened centrist moderator, Margaret Brennan, who was like, wait a minute, more Democrats voted for the continuing resolution than you did. They saved the government from a government shutdown, because without them, the government would have shut down. So that was strike 4, which then leads us to the day before the day of McCarthy's ouster. Now, Kevin McCarthy publicly said he would not make a deal with Democrats. He repeatedly said it. Not going to cut a deal with them. Not going to do it. Could that have been bravado? Was it sincere? I don't know, but that's what he said, okay? We do have indications that in private, House Democrats did try to reach out for a deal. There was a Washington Post op-ed by Hakeem Jeffries indicating that he tried to make a deal for a bipartisan coalition power-sharing government. AOC and Ilhan Omar and various members of the House Democratic Conference were publicly saying in interviews that, hey, we'll vote for you, but you got to give us something. Our votes don't come for free. And Kevin McCarthy, according to reporting, said that Democrats did come to him with a deal, and he wouldn't take it. So we do have multiple sources indicating the House Democrats were willing to make a deal, and indeed did offer him one, and both public and private indications that McCarthy said no. Now, some people say, well, why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, I agree if Kevin McCarthy were a completely rational actor. So, number one, I kind of reject the premise. But even if There actually some kind of rational basis for this. You have to consider what the Republican Party is. It punishes bipartisanship. Trump wanted the government shutdown, and Trump is the absolute, indisputable cult leader of the Republican Party. He also wanted the impeachment inquiry into Biden. So Kevin McCarthy was a Trump sycophant, right? So the cult king god emperor, Donald Trump, that would have displeased him if you made a bipartisan coalition deal with the Democrats. It may very well have been he just thought it was going to be political suicide anyway because he'd already been seen as working too closely with Democrats. It was part of the reason why Matt Gaetz didn't like him, is because he was seen as too much of an establishment figure. Number 3, it may have been an attempt to lure Republicans back over. Hey, guys, I could have gone to Democrats, or I could have accepted a deal by Democrats and saved myself and gone around you, but I'm such a stand-up party guy that I'm going to reject any attempt from the other side, hopefully to inspire them to vote for him. Maybe he was hoping that Republicans would go, oh my God, Kevin McCarthy said he wasn't going to cut a deal with Democrats. He's going to stand on principle, even though he could have saved himself. Maybe we should save him, right? Because any other person in his situation might make a deal with Democrats. Who knows? There are all sorts of explanations. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the facts. What the reporting is that Kevin McCarthy said in private, and what Democrats said in private, and what we know Kevin McCarthy said in public. So at the end of the day, there was no opportunity for Democrats to seize. There was no opportunity for them to fail to seize. They tried to make a deal with Kevin McCarthy, or at least indicated they were open to one. Kevin McCarthy publicly and privately refused to deal. You can't make someone accept a deal. If I throw you a lifeline or a life vest or whatever, I can't make you put it on. If you end up drowning as a result, that's completely on you. I didn't fail some sort of opportunity. I did my part. And as a matter of fact, you could argue Democrats went above and beyond the call of duty, which leads me to my last point. Even if, in a different world, that, let's say Kevin McCarthy came to Democrats and said, guys, listen, I know we've had some rough times, but I really want to be speaker, and they're going to get rid of me, so please, and he drops to his knees and pleads and begs, save my speakership, I'll give you whatever you want. Even in that world, and by the way, we have no evidence anything like that happened, but even if that did happen, I think you could easily make the argument that even then, Democrats were not obligated to save him, because he'd already proven himself to be a liar, a brinkman, and a bad faith actor. You wouldn't trust someone who had repeatedly lied to you, not just on minor things, not just minor white lies, but on major substantive things before, right? Nor would you be obligated to trust that person. It's the same thing. There's no good faith argument here to be made against Democrats. There was no opportunity, based on the evidence, for them to seize. Therefore, they can't be held accountable for not seizing it because the opportunity wasn't there. Nor were they morally or politically obligated to just save Kevin McCarthy just 'cause, right? We have to stop. I refer to this all the time, the asymmetry of expectations. We have to stop indulging it. Democrats are not obligated to save Republicans for themselves. Anyone who wants to voice criticism, this is so frustrating, the House is in chaos when we really need it to have order, all of that is the responsibility of the Republican Party. It's the Republican Party's inferiority, their stupidity, their dysfunction, their incompetence. The fact that they are geared only for culture war nonsense and gotchas. Oh my God, is Biden trying to take away the gas stove? Oh my God, is the green M&M wearing sneakers instead of heels? That's the stuff they care about. That's all they're good for. When it comes to radicalizing their base and making their base angry, they're really, really good at that. In terms of managing an economy, managing social issues, actually governing responsibly, they suck. They are vastly, objectively inferior in all ways to the Democratic Party. And they themselves have admitted it. Twitter and YouTube are littered with sitting Republican congressmen and women openly admitting we can't govern. We are sending a signal to the American people. We don't know how to govern. We're an opposition party. One Republican, I know for a matter of fact, said that exact phrase. We are oriented towards opposition. All we know how to do is oppose. We're the contrarian party. We're the finger-pointing party. So I just want to make the case that no matter what happens with Jim Jordan, it doesn't retroactively, undermine the argument and the rationale for why Democrats did what they did with Kevin McCarthy. As I said, we're going to use the metaphor of a car, as clumsy as it may be. It's not like you have a choice between some ratchet old car versus a non-functioning car, right? It's not like McCarthy was not a great option, but he was serviceable. No. you have a choice between two cars, neither of which work. They're both totaled. One is just, a pile of debris, and the other one has been vaporized in an explosion, right? It doesn't matter. The car won't work. The things that make Kevin McCarthy, or rather the things that make Jim Jordan a really bad choice for Speaker, that he's a liar, a bad faith actor, and a brinkman, all apply to Kevin McCarthy. It's the same thing. All the extra stuff that makes Jim Jordan probably much more repugnant, that sprinkles on top of the crap sundae. So I just want to make that case. Just want to remind everybody, this is not the time to beat up Democrats. If you want to make the case that there was an opportunity, a good faith, sincere opportunity between them and Kevin McCarthy, good luck making that case. But as far as I'm concerned, it would require you to reveal a completely different Kevin McCarthy. You would have to pull an Avengers Endgame and completely pull a different Kevin McCarthy out of a completely different timeline and a different set of facts along with it. There's just not a case to be made.